Before empires rose, before kings claimed divine power, there was a goddess who wore many faces, born as Inanna, reborn as Ishtar, feared across every realm she touched. The world called her the morning star, but ancient texts called her something far darker. Welcome back to Legends Reborn. Tonight we step into the forbidden story of Ishtar, a goddess who moved through civilizations like a storm, changing shape, changing power, never staying the same. And if you've seen my videos on Inanna or Astarte, you already know the deeper truth. These weren't separate goddesses at all, but echoes of something older, something darker, something that refused to die. But Ishtar became the most feared reflection of them all. So, settle in. Let's begin. Civilization begins where the rivers meet. In the ancient lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, people watched the world with eyes sharpened by survival. They lived close to storms, close to hunger, close to fire. Every force that shaped their lives seemed alive, and every emotion that stirred the human soul felt powerful enough to shatter the earth. And in that world, gods were not ideas carved in stone. They were experiences. They were hunger. They were longing. They were storms. They were war. They were everything that moved a heart or broke a kingdom. Ishtar emerged from that living landscape. She was not introduced. She arrived, already vast, already dangerous, already pulsing with contradictions. Early hymns do not describe a gentle deity of a single virtue, but a presence that spilled across boundaries. She was the morning star that rose before sunrise, shimmering with beauty and violence in equal measure. She was desire that compelled lovers toward one another, and the fierce ambition that pushed kings into war. She was tenderness and devastation, creation and ruin, everything humans feared and craved at once. When Babylon took shape, Ishtar stepped into its highest towers. Kings claimed their authority through her blessing, believing that no crown meant anything without her approval. Massive temples rose in her honor, decorated with lion reliefs that seemed ready to leap from the stone. People prayed to her not out of safety, but out of awe, because her favor felt like a storm that could lift a life to greatness, and her contempt like a wind that could strip a city to its bones. Her love was never soft. It was overwhelming, consuming, the kind of affection that gives life because it burns so fiercely. And her fury was not a passing emotion. It was a force that toppled walls and shattered empires. To love Ishtar was to risk everything. To anger her was to risk far more. This is why the Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of her with equal parts longing and terror. The story begins almost tenderly. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, stirs her desire. She approaches him not as a goddess descending from the heavens, but as a woman accustomed to being welcomed. Her voice promises splendor, power, boundless pleasure, a life held in the hands of a goddess. But Gilgamesh hesitates. He knows her stories. He knows the fate of those who accepted her gifts. Lovers transformed into broken creatures. Companions left ruined. Animals twisted into symbols of her past whims. His refusal is quiet, but it pierces her like a blade. In a single breath, longing turns to vengeance. Ishtar rises to the heavens and unleashes the bull of heaven upon the world below. Its hooves tear open the earth, its breath scorches the land, and every step carries the weight of her wounded pride. This is not the wrath of a simple deity. It is the heartbreak of a goddess who cannot comprehend rejection. Yet the most haunting story tied to her name is the one whispered about her descent into the Underworld. No battle leads her there, no feud. She simply decides to go, though the reasons remain uncertain. Perhaps to challenge the laws of creation, perhaps to confront her sister, or perhaps because even a goddess born of desire is not immune to curiosity or grief. At the first gate, she is stopped. Her crown must be removed, not as a list, but as a ritual, a reminder that power has no meaning in death. At each gate, another symbol of her authority is taken away. Her necklace, her bracelets, her garments. She steps forward stripped piece by piece, not as punishment, but as transformation. By the time she stands before Ereshkigal, she is no longer the radiant goddess worshipped in Babylon, but a bare soul facing the weight of the underworld. Death takes her quickly, and above, the world begins to unravel, not in fragments, not in sudden destruction, but in a quiet collapse. The fields lose their warmth. Animals wander without instinct, unable to feel desire. The air grows heavy, as if the pulse of creation has slowed. Human hearts grow still, drifting into a dullness that feels unnatural. Without the goddess of love and life, the world seems to forget how to move. Only divine intervention forces her release. But the universe demands balance, and her return requires another soul. Dumuzi, her consort, becomes the sacrifice. He is taken below in her place, pulled into a cycle of descent that mirrors the seasons themselves. One life falling so, another may rise. Her descent is not just a story, it is a revelation. It shows a goddess who does not belong to a single world, a single emotion, or a single form. She brings abundance and suffering with the same hand. She rises and she falls with equal force. She loves with intensity and destroys with that same fire. She dies and returns, like the seasons, like the morning star, like desire itself. Ishtar is not balance. She is the swing between extremes, the relentless rhythm of passion that has shaped humanity since the first cities were born. And her darkest mysteries, the rituals, the forbidden practices, the fear she inspired even in her worshippers, those belong to another part of her story. If the first half of Ishtar's story reveals her power, the second half reveals the price of it. For while kings worshipped her publicly and cities carved her lions into their walls, the rituals held in her honor were whispered about with a mixture of awe and unease. Even in a world filled with gods of storm and fire, there was something about Ishtar that made people hesitate before speaking her name aloud. She was not simply adored. She was approached the way one approaches a beautiful flame, knowing its warmth can comfort, but its touch can scorch. In Babylon, her temples dominated the skyline, rising like mountains shaped by human devotion. Inside them, the air hung heavy with incense, and the flickering glow of oil lamps cast shadows that seemed to move with a will of their own. People came seeking blessings, but few understood what kind of goddess they were inviting into their lives. Ishtar did not ask her followers to kneel in quiet reverence. She demanded immersion, mind, body, and spirit. Devotion to her required stepping into the unpredictable territory between pleasure and danger. Where emotions became offerings and desire itself became ritual. Priestesses moved through the sanctuary like extensions of the goddess, carrying her fierce charisma in their voices and gestures. Worshippers believed that through them, Ishtar spoke, not with gentle comfort, but with the directness of someone who knew the fragile structures inside a human heart. Those who sought her guidance rarely left unchanged. She offered love that felt like revelation, strength that surged like a rising tide, and released that cut deeper than they expected. More than one devotee walked away feeling as though they had been opened, their weaknesses illuminated, their desires sharpened into something they could not entirely control, but the fear surrounding her had roots deeper than ritual. Ishtar's presence stretched far beyond the temple walls, shaping the destiny of cities and rulers. Kings who claimed her favor rose with startling speed, as if the goddess herself had taken them by the hand. Yet those same kings knew that her blessings came with tension. She was known to lift a ruler to glory one season and abandon him the next, leaving his enemies to descend like wolves on a wounded animal. To rule with Ishtar's support was to walk beside a storm, majestic, intoxicating, and always one breath away from destruction. Her influence was not limited to love or sovereignty. She moved through the world as a force of battle, a goddess whose presence on the battlefield was said to warp the momentum of war itself. Soldiers prayed to her not only for victory, but for the courage to surrender their fear, to let the heat of combat carry them the way passion had carried the lovers in her myths. Ishtar's war was not rational. It was visceral, born from the same fires that fueled her desire. It was said that when an army marched under her protection, the air itself felt charged, as though the ground trembled with anticipation. It is this duality, the blend of tenderness and violence, that made her both cherished and feared. And it is this same duality that carried her from Sumer and Babylon into other cultures, reshaping her name without ever altering her essence. But as her influence spread, so did the unease surrounding her worship. Ishtar was too potent, too volatile, too willing to blur the lines between devotion and surrender. When new empires rose and older gods were reshaped or replaced, she was a goddess who did not fit neatly into the structures of those who took power. In some lands her name was softened, transformed, or absorbed. In others, she became a warning, a figure painted with suspicion, her rituals reinterpreted as threats. Even so, she never vanished. She simply adapted, the way she always had. A goddess of dawn and dusk, of life and death, of war that feels like passion and love that feels like fire. She slipped through the cracks of changing cultures and found her way into later stories. The planet Venus inherited her brilliance. Tales of seductive goddesses, warrior queens, and vengeful spirits all carried fragments of her. Even the fears that later traditions projected onto feminine power, the unease, the fascination, the desire to control what could not be controlled, all echo the shadow of Ishtar. It is tempting to think of her as a relic of the ancient world, a goddess swallowed by time. But that would be a misunderstanding. Ishtar is not a figure that history could bury. She is a pattern, a reflection of the human heart when it reaches for something larger than itself, and finds both beauty and danger in the same touch. She survives wherever passion becomes strength, wherever longing becomes ambition, wherever love and wrath become indistinguishable. And even now, thousands of years later, her story continues to breathe through the symbols we use, the stars we follow, and the myths that refuse to fade. The morning star still rises before dawn, bright and untamed, reminding the world of a goddess who never allowed herself to be confined to a single form. This is Legends Reborn, where the past still breathes. If you enjoyed this dive into Ishtar's legend and stayed with me to the end, feel free to explore the rest of the channel. Leave a comment about what drew you in, or even what challenged you. Every voice shapes the next chapter of this journey, and you're always welcome here.